There we go. Hi, everyone. We're back today to talk about police in our schools and what students are saying about that and how they feel, or people who were recently students in public schools. So we have Salma here with us today, and hopefully might have one other person joining us to share a little bit about their experiences as students and community members. And why so many are asking for this. So we want to talk about this a little bit more. And I'm going to let Salma introduce herself, maybe tell a little bit about herself, and we'll go from there.
Oh, thank you, Roxanne. So my name is Salma Perez. I live in Los Angeles, California. I work as a communications intern at Anahuac International University Preparatory of North America, which is also the school that I grew up in, K through 12. It's a charter school in the northeast part of Los Angeles. It's also an indigenous-based school. So our curriculum is embedded into cultural tradition and identity, as well as aligned A through G. Therefore, students who are part of our school, 9th through 12th grade, the curriculum is automatically aligned to their eligibility to apply to a UC school, something that public schools often only offer to a select group of students. But at Semillas, you go through the same courses, same classes, same cohorts, K through 12 for the most part. So I grew up with a lot of the same classmates my whole life.
That's such a amazing concept. I love that. And I'd actually heard of Semillas before from a parent. And she was telling me about it. And I just thought, oh my God, that's amazing. Like my Mexican American mom would have loved a school like that. Or to just
Right.
even if her daughters didn't go there, just to know that a school like that exists, I think is amazing. And that just kind of goes to show some of the innovative schools and different concepts you can have with charter schools that are different from any other public school. So I think that's really great. And how did going to that school just kind of impact you and affect some of the work that you're doing now?
So again, the school offers room for students to be active participants of the community, whether that be in the classroom. So if that's learning our true history, taking very much different classes like Latin American studies, Chicano studies, different courses that really open you up to what colonization has been and looks like, and especially in education, and how we are also very lucky to have a space where we get to decolonize our education and what that means for us as a community. So growing up, when the school was founded in 2002, I was part of the kindergarten class. So we started off at a small park here in El Sereno. So it just so happened that the school was being located in my community, and somebody told my parents, and I was already enrolled in a different school because I was going to be starting kinder. And so they decided to take me out. They went to the orientation here. They loved the concept, which is very much about culture, indigenous roots, learning your true history, incorporating at that time it was 4 languages. So we had Nahuatl, which is a native Aztec language of Mexico. We also had Mandarin, Spanish, and English. So those were the 4 languages that you learned. At the time, I learned from kinder to 8th grade. After that, Nahuatl became an elective, and during that time, it was like budget cuts within the LAUSD system, and so we had to let go of our Mandarin program. And so that was a little bit about how we grew up. Language of being a big part of who we are, and understanding how vital that is around the globe. And so we would also do like Tai Chi. That was definitely something that I grew up doing K through, I don't remember if it was on to my middle school years, but once I entered middle school, we also had like a Kung Fu program. So we had a master who would come from Beijing and work with our students, and was also incorporated into our physical education classes. So yeah, our upbringing at a school like that was very innovative, very different. It allowed for us to really explore different ways of thinking. It's also an IB school. I don't think I've mentioned that, but making it an international baccalaureate world school accredited. So we were actually the first charter public school in Los Angeles to receive accreditation by the IB program. And they have their primary years program, and their NYP, which is their middle years program. And then they also have the diploma program. So when you're in the PYP, it's your elementary years. And ultimately what this IB program allows for students to do, it's you have to follow like a rigorous curriculum. So these are programs embedded into schools all around the globe. And so it's very much intended with the intention of creating well-rounded students no matter where you're at. So we go through different trainings. So we don't have like finals, we have summative assessments, or now like known as summative tasks. So every unit you complete, whether that be an experiment, a project, a writing piece. And it's usually really to encourage students to delve into their projects and really take something away. So once you finish the PYP program, you move on to your middle years program, which is 6th through 10th grade. So you don't technically graduate your 8th grade year. So I remember when I was in 8th grade, me and my friends were like very upset that all of our other friends from other schools were graduating, but we weren't. But once we went on to high school, we learned that, you know, you do the personal project. So in order to culminate the middle years program. So this personal project is takes up your whole 10th grade year, and it's really dedicated to whatever you want. So it's a personal project. You decide the topic, you decide what it is that you want your product to be, and it goes hand in hand with like a written piece on what it is that you did, your research. It's a project that takes a whole 9 months, about 9 months, I want to say. So once you culminate that program, at Semillas, we decide to take up the Indiginations program. So that just means that you take various different classes like Latin American studies, Chicano studies. You also take like some college courses. So, and every year it varies. We've had 8 generations of graduating classes. We just celebrated our past 8th generation this past Friday. So that was just really awesome to see a lot of the students from that cohort. I've seen grow up since they were like 3 or 4 years old. So it's really, you really see that this type of school is community-led, community-based. A lot of the teachers have their kids there. A lot of the staff have their kids there. So you very much do grow up with one another. And then you come your siblings and the other generation. So I'm the first generation, and I have 2 younger sisters. And so one of them graduated in 2018 and now goes to UC Davis. And one of my younger sister, she just finished up her 10th grade year. So she just finished her personal project, which she decided to do on immigration. And so she did like a documentary about a little bit of our story as a family and just the journey of other folks who, you know, their realities being here in a country where, you know, their status really affects their day-to-day life. So that was really awesome to see her complete that. And oftentimes a lot of our students take the personal project and create their brands, create their businesses. So it's very much a creative school. Everybody has some type of talent. Everybody is really awesome. They have art and music, and all of our teachers are really awesome. So I still have relationships with a lot of the teachers that I grew up with and who taught me, and just the understanding of what learning and teaching really is, and how, you know, they simultaneously learn from us as children as well. And even as a school, every year we've been learning and making it stronger. And right now I'm starting up the alumni association, and hopefully to be more active in our community and whatnot. So yeah, that's a little bit about what Semillas does. They all like to be involved in protests. I've also had the chance to go to the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous issues when I was in the 10th grade. So from 6th to 10th grade, I was always involved in the Model United Nations. So always going to different debates here in the LA County, or, you know, and it's just the experience of like representing a country, taking up an issue, and then kind of having to find these solutions and drafting those solutions. And you're working with other students from across the, oftentimes I think it's like California, because a lot of students travel to these different schools so that we can engage in that activity. And then by the time we got to 10th grade, we actually got the opportunity to go to the UN and be active participants and represent Indigenous communities and just being engaged in the different conversations and struggles that these other Indigenous communities across the globe really was something that shifted my whole perspective at that age. I definitely learned that we all are all interconnected in a way that we don't often see visibly, but even just acknowledging that Indigenous peoples is considered, it could be from anywhere across the globe. It's just, where you come from and, your environment and really the land that you come from and how even just like immigration and like these borders that have been created, which are socially constructed, really has taken away a lot of our sense of identity that connects us to where we really come from. So that was really a moment that shifted me into, okay, I know that I want to pursue a political career. Just because even at the UN level, at that foreign policy level, just how everything is interconnected in policy is really what drives everything that we get to do, at least within society. And so at the time, it just so happened, this was maybe 2013, 2014. That's when I met Mikitsli actually. Is when we started working towards the charter renewal, because at the time when we went to New York, we had like a change.org petition that we carried out. And it was just, that's when I learned that we need to have more schools like Semillas that allow for innovative ways of learning and that have to be very much curated to their community specifically, incorporating holistic approaches as well. So that was really a moment that shifted a lot of my understanding of the world and me as an Indigenous person and me as a student and as a leader. It really pushed me to use my voice to really advocate for my school. Spent time lobbying and making trips to Sacramento, LAUSD, and that was just part of like my school day. So it was like sometimes, you would end class and then it's like, oh, there's this meeting at City Hall or there's this meeting at LAUSD with or just these different things. And all of our students, became aware of like we have to fight for our school. Like we literally have to. And that's when Mikitsi and her mom brought their expertise into our school. And that's how we got connected back when we were in high school. So yeah, that's a little bit about what being a student at Semillas can be like. And yeah, and it's really awesome to see now I work there and to really
Yeah, I
see
didn't know that. Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah, so I'm right
I
now
was
I
like,
just
you're an
shifted.
amazing spokesperson for the school, not just being a student, but I mean, that's amazing. I have so many different directions like I could go in as far as asking
Right.
you questions because I think it's amazing, but I do want to pull McKitsley in.
Yeah.
And we were
Yes,
just kind of
right,
talking
I
about,
know.
your school experiences and obviously the kind of school that Salma went to, which is very
Yeah,
unique, but just so, so needed in all different
definitely.
kinds of communities. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about just your experience in school, McKetsley,
Yeah,
and what were, maybe you didn't go to a school exactly like Salma, but just kind of what maybe got you involved and what was like the environment.
definitely. Well, thank you so much for having me. And my apologies, I was having a bit of technical difficulties this morning, but yeah, so my education experience has been very interesting. So I always, very much am proud of the fact that I am a second generation. Both my parents are first generation college graduates in our family. So because of their experience in receiving a college education, it definitely changed my trajectory in how they viewed education and the importance of it. And so the neighborhood that I grew up in didn't have the best schools. So for most of my life, I did attend a private school. And that was really just kind of my trajectory for most of my life up until the middle of my high school experience. My first 2 years, I was at a private all girls Catholic school in Pasadena. And so towards the middle of my sophomore year, I experienced having a really bad concussion. And so after, my recovery, which was about 3 months, I ended up having to make up pretty much my whole sophomore year at the end. And so just that in itself really shifted a lot of how my experience was going to be at that school. I wasn't given the resources that I needed. And then going into my junior year, was actually denied going into AP classes. So, you know, my mom really trusted that this school that she was obviously paying for was going to be giving me the best resources that I could, but it was predominantly white and predominantly really affluent. So that just kind of told me everything and told us everything that we needed to know. So in the middle of, my high school experience, my summer of my sophomore year going into my junior year, she decided to transfer me out. And I remember being so upset and just really not, happy about it. I was really upset and just really kind of shocked at like, oh my God, I just made that transition and like it just happened kind of out of nowhere. And just like also the social kind of feelings around it of like, oh wow, I'm not gonna have like my same friends and all these different things. But I ended up transferring to a charter school in Alliance High School in Glassell Park. It was then ESAT and is now Leichman Levine Environmental High School. And so transferring there really made all the difference, and I am like forever grateful to have had the experience of graduating from there. So I ended up graduating with 6 AP courses and 2 community college classes. So that was just in 2 years. So you can just imagine what my high school experience would have been like if I would have been there all 4. So it really had made all the difference. I had access to a whole bunch of programs and again, my AP and community college classes. So entering college, I was already kind of at a head start. So I just really am forever grateful to have had that experience, because even now going, now I'm a community college graduate, I can officially say that, and will be transferring to UC in the fall. And I feel like the skills that I developed in high school in those AP courses really have led me up until this point to be prepared for college and also just for the UC system. So I'm really just grateful and so like almost in awe of the fact that like the skills that I developed there really have led me so far and up until this point. So yeah, that's been a little bit about me.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't know all of that background. I had heard a little bit about the private school and some of the challenges and stuff from your mom. And I have a younger sister who just graduated from community college as well, LA Mission. And we're 10 years apart. So she's in her late 20s and I'm in my late 30s. And we also live in a community where the public schools are not great. And that is the San Fernando Valley in the northeast part. So we live in Sylmar. Next to us is San Fernando and Pacoima. And the district schools in this area have been very low performing for decades, for a long time. And so we actually do have a lot of charter schools, independent charter schools in this area, because I think there was such a need. The first two district schools to convert to charter schools are right here in Pacoima. And one of them was the elementary school that my daughter went to. So, and then when my sister went to school, we were living here in the Valley, and my mom didn't know about charter schools. So she ended up putting my sister in a private school as well, close by. And I think, and it's not necessarily always as great as you think it's going to be, and your experience was different being in Pasadena. Now the private school that she went to is still in our same community, still in the same city of Sylmar, but it didn't necessarily have all of the great things that you maybe thought it would have, that you expect when you're like paying that additional money to go to a school. And I think had my mom known about charter schools at the time, maybe things would have been different. And it wasn't necessarily something she had a lot of extra money to afford. But my mom was the first in our family to go to college. She finished when she was about 40. and she became a nurse and was able to buy the home that we live in and really change the trajectory of our lives by doing that. I was next to go to college, and then now my sister has just graduated. So I love hearing these stories from you because I have a daughter who's going into 7th grade, and we're going to have to, start looking at some of these things. And she can be very overwhelmed with school. So finding a school that's really a good fit for her, and she's very much into art and animation, video game design, stuff like that is really up her alley. And so when we look at high school, those will be some of the things that we look at as well. But I wanted you guys to share some of those experiences before we got into talking about police in schools, just so people understood kind of some of the background and experiences that you had. And I know I've heard some different things, but I would love if you guys shared like why so many students are behind this movement to begin with. I see a lot of my friends who are also probably in their late 30s or early 40s who don't understand, who when they hear defund police, they're like, what? That scares them. And what I've been trying to say, and I'm not trying to necessarily start hostile arguments with people, but some of them have gone that way, where I've just tried to give some context to it. So they're posting negatively about it and their reaction to it, and that's fine. But I'll chime in and just say, hey, I just wanted to let you know, because I don't think most people know this, is that students are the ones that are leading this movement, especially when it comes to police in our schools. And also, this is not new. Like, this isn't a movement that just started 3 weeks ago, right? This is a movement that has been going on specifically here in Los Angeles and LAUSD. I'm sure, as both of you guys know, last year, the students who have been pushing for this movement had a huge win when LAUSD agreed to stop doing random searches. Right? And that was all student-led. So I know parents want to chime in, and parents should have a voice, but at the same time, as a parent, I think we should be listening to the students first and foremost. They're the ones on the campus. Why do they feel unsafe, even though police are there and they're supposed to feel safe, right? But yet they're not. So I would love for you guys to talk about that and why you think so many students are leading this movement.
Definitely. I'm just going to bring in this experience really quickly. I think the first time that I kind of was a little bit shaken up by the police was actually when I transferred to the charter school that I was at. We had a sheriff's department and a few officers on our campus. We were also
co-located
with the Bandicamp LACCD building. And so that was actually the first time that I had ever been around like police or any type of officer in my school environment. And it was the first time that I have ever experienced like a searching in my classroom. And it was something that really shook me. I remember coming home to my mom and being like, hey, this happened today. And she was like, yeah. She was like, these things happen. And I remember being like, wow, that's crazy. Like, how is it that this is like just allowed? Like, I understood, right? I understood like why and just kind of like the basics around it, but was definitely really in shock. I remember I was in chemistry and they were like, okay, everybody like leave your stuff where it's at and everybody line up against the wall. And I was like, what is this? I was like, I'm here like trying to learn about chemistry and like why am I like being searched? And yeah, so it was just really interesting to have that experience and then obviously get used to it up until the end of my senior year. But I maybe experienced it about 4 or 5 times throughout the year. So, just even having to go through that is a little bit like, whoa, it's a little shocking. I think, yeah, so it was just very interesting to have had that. And then hear so many stories later after, being involved with other organizations, just seeing how often that occurred and just how it really does cause trauma. So yeah, it was just really, really interesting to have had that and then understand just kind of context to everything later. Yeah, but would love to hear.
We were going to have Desiree joining us, another one of our comadres, and unfortunately she had something come up and couldn't join us. But last year, the organization that you guys are with did it was like a seminar, and it was down in Long Beach. I forget what convention it was an education convention. And they did this skit where they showed what it was like to be randomly searched in class. Now, I never experienced that. And so I kind of came in, I had just driven all the way down to Long Beach from the Valley, and I got there a little bit late, and they were like in the middle of this skit. And let me tell you, like, it was real. It was so real. And just like the way that the students are talked to, the way that they're yelled at, the way you're automatically like treated like you're guilty of something. From the moment these people walk in the door and announce that there's going to be a search. And I remember there was such like a visceral like reaction from people. And I remember there was a white woman in the room, and she had a very like strong reaction to what was happening. And it really, really gave us a good idea. I mean, as close as we could to what that might feel like. And it was pretty, I could see why that would be so traumatizing, you know, especially like, you're just coming to the school and like all of a sudden this is happening. And I think that's interesting because before you came on, Salma and I had talked about how so many charter schools actually don't really have police on campus. So I was surprised to hear that yours did. And this wasn't so much to be a conversation about charter schools. It's just ended up that way since that's been our experiences. And my daughter's charter school is co-located at a district school as well. So my daughter's school, Gals, is co-located at Panorama High School. Panorama High School does have police. I don't necessarily always see them on campus, but I definitely see them parked outside and around the area. There's also a station directly across that street, and it's because that area is not, the greatest area. There's a street right behind the high school called Blythe, and there's the Blythe Street Gang right behind there. That's a pretty active gang that a lot of people know about. So, that's new for me. I've never been on a co-located campus. My daughter's school is a middle school that's co-located at a high school. So that's kind of different. But because there's so much negative discussion about charter schools on co-located campuses being competition, that this felt like it was less of a competition because we're talking about different grades. And then what actually happened is last year, not this graduation season, but last year, there were 99 girls who graduated from 8th grade, and about 30 of them went right into the high school. So the fact that it actually filtered some students to the high school, I think helps make that relationship more friendly. And the principals work together, where at some collated campuses, that's not the case. So, I've seen them around, and just the whole experience is really different. And honestly, when we went into distance learning and had to do that, I wasn't too upset about that, because dropping my daughter there every day at school, I have to tell you, was scary. The first couple of weeks that they started, there was a bomb threat on that street, Blythe, right behind the school, which was detonated, and thankfully somebody reported it. But it's kind of a scary area, even though I don't necessarily live in a neighborhood that's quiet or anything like that. But this just has so much more congestion. So it's interesting to see these different experiences. But Selma, did you want to jump in at all as far as why you feel students are, or maybe personal experiences you've had or know that friends of yours have had?
Personally, I never grew up with police presence on campus. So it does make me uncomfortable when I do see it, or when they did make their appearance. I think it would be, very specific cases, usually related to home-related things from different students. So you would always wonder what's happening. And my school was so small that whenever there was some type of movement happening amongst like whether it be police or the fire department or anything like that, you would always want to know what was happening. But other than that, we never really had any presence on campus aside from security. And so that probably came, I think I remember that taking place 2, maybe 3 times throughout my years at Semillas. And it was when I was younger, it was probably because people got into fights, but that wasn't something that was normal for us. And actually, I remember when I was in middle school and like my first fight. Like I had been at the school since I was in kinder. I'm now in like 6th or 7th grade, and for the first time ever, I'm seeing like this fight break out across me and my friends. And I like, and these were the older kids too, because you were like on the same campus as like high schoolers. And so at that time, it just so happened that they had brought in a whole new round of students that had never been students at Semillas, but were coming in from the local middle school. And so that local middle school, also, you know, they just say that they have a lot of students. So, you know, there's always some type of something happening, whether it be a fight. So there was always a lot of concern with like, you know, we have new students and what that environment was now going to shift. And, you know, but ultimately it seems like a lot of the students that would come in, and although there was maybe 3 fights that year, or since then, it wasn't something that again happened. And it was more because once the students would come in and they would realize it's a very different school and you can't necessarily just disrespect one another in those ways. And so just the establishment of like how we feel towards each other, and just like the time to be present in our classrooms, and our teachers being very engaging, and us like as a school providing different programming, after school programs. And so I think that really allowed for students to find other ways to filter out and also find community and support. I think our school does a good job at addressing even personal issues that families may be facing. So I think even just providing those kinds of resources and that kind of help definitely goes a long way in how the students behave and relate to one another. So again, it was just like these moments of very limited security, maybe for like 2 weeks after a fight, just to make sure that there's no tension and, you know, there's no threats and things like that happening. But other than that, I never had any actual experience with police on campus or any searches. Even when Mikitli said that she got searched, I didn't know that you experienced that. And I didn't even know that your school, but now that I'm thinking, I think we made a trip a few months ago, and there was like police cars outside, and I was like, oh, okay. And it's normal. And it's normal when you drive by these schools and you see it. But then right now I'm realizing, I'm like, that's not normal, because I think my experience would have been a little different. I think my feelings towards how uncomfortable that feels, even just hearing about it. So I can only imagine going through those moments and the motion of like getting searched, even though you know you didn't do anything wrong. And just how that feeling is like embedded into our schools, and our young children are very much, you know, navigating these feelings, and they ultimately carry that on. And I think just a little bit about how that does create some type of trauma as students, and how our ability to even learn in the environment, especially if we're being put down and things like that. I think it could be a negative impact. So I know Semillas is very much in solidarity of abolishing the police, dismantling white supremacy within LAUSD, and just calling out for these other actions that I think are necessary in our public school systems here in Los Angeles and across the nation. But yeah, that's a little bit about my experience.
I think that's a really good point that you make, is that your school did not have permanent police on campus at all times, right? However, when there was an issue or something that was happening because there were fights or whatever it may be, or let's say there was some kind of a threat or something posed on the school, you can bring in some temporary police or security just to address that problem. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be there on campus all the time, right? Because when they are, look at how much money LAUSD is spending, $70 million. I mean, we know that LAUSD has a huge budget as the second largest school district in the country. 70 million alone is going to have police on our schools, right? So what else could be done with that money? You know, during the strike last year, the teachers were talking about needing nurses on campus, right? And counselors and therapists. And again, a lot of charter schools do have those things because they don't have police on campus. They don't spend the money on police. They spend the money on the counselors and the nurses. And they have a lot less of these problems. Not saying that there's never any issues or fights or things like that. Yeah, it's going to happen sometimes, especially if you have a new group of kids coming into a school and they don't quite understand the culture, and they're used to a culture that is maybe more hostile, right? So so we've seen it done before. We know that this can be done. And we know that not having police on schools doesn't mean that like all mayhem is going to break loose. And so I'd love to hear like what your perspective is on that and how you feel about having counselors versus police on campus.
Yeah. I think for me, in my experience, once I transferred over to my high school that I graduated from, I definitely felt like my counselors were more accessible. It was actually the first time that I had ever felt like, oh wow, like okay, I can go to my counselor and ask her any question that I have on anything really, on whether that's how my classes are going and what I need to be taking, or just like how my day is. And it was actually the first time that I feel like I had ever been exposed to having a like mental health support on my high school campus. And I was like, wow, I was like, that's pretty cool. Like I have like pretty much like a therapist on campus and I could go there whenever. And I know a lot of students took advantage of that. It really made all the difference.
My daughter has.
Yeah. And I always look to that and think like, wow, okay, there's power in being able to have, even though our counseling office was small, it was important for us to be able to have those relationships and know that, there were people that we could trust if we had any issues going on. And recently I actually just found out that a few of the counselors at my high school are no longer going to be there due to, just some cuts and obviously the impact of what COVID has left us with. So that also just makes me think about like, okay, the school environment of how that's going to change. And because these counselors are really essential to creating a positive environment in our schools. And I mean, now as a graduate, I'm like, okay, I'm so grateful to have had the experience of having counselors who have cared and who also looked like me. And just the importance of that and having, just more representation, I think is really powerful. And, again, just being reflective of the community that they serve. So yeah, I'm just, it's going to be interesting to see how we move forward in this. And definitely student voice is going to be important in bringing all of these issues up and really voicing the importance of having more funding towards counselors versus police. And again, the like essential need for them to be on our campuses rather than, security measures to make sure that we're safe.
Yeah. Right. And that's really, I'm sad to hear that school is going to be having these cuts and lose these counselors, because now kids are going to need the counseling more than ever, right? After going through coronavirus. I mean, there is a father at my daughter's school who died because of coronavirus on Sunday. And so it's real. It is very real. And I always like to bring awareness to, in the San Fernando Valley where I live, the 3 cities that are at the top for coronavirus cases is 1, Panorama City, right, where my daughter goes to school. 2 is Sylmar, where I live. 3 is Pacoima. And what do these cities all have in common? They're all communities of color, right? And so we know that they are getting impacted at a higher rate. Less people that have jobs where they can work from home. They have more essential jobs. They have to go out. They're vendors. They're construction workers. They work in restaurants, whatever it may be. And so our communities are being impacted even more. So we're going to need those counselors and those therapists even more. And I know that my daughter's school has been helping support this family, like has been taking them meals. And, I have a contact at the mayor's office that was taking them meals and just helping them with whatever help. And, I'm heartbroken thinking that tomorrow is Father's Day, and this family lost, father, and he had three children under the age of 12. So, these are the things that kids are going to need these counselors for. And it's not just for violence reasons. It could be for grief. It could be for so many different things. So we are going to have to advocate, and we are going to have to step up. And hopefully, once we figure out exactly how we want to do that, we can bring some more information to our viewers about how they can help and participate to try to make sure that we can still get that funding. Yeah.
Definitely.
I think the counselors, I mean, I've seen so many statistics out there that talk about, I think like 1 in 4, students goes to school with police on campus, but don't have a nurse or a counselor. And it's not, let's make this very clear. This is not about having an extra nurse or an extra
Right.
counselor. It's
Yeah.
about having a nurse or a
Having one.
counselor to begin with.
To begin,
Like,
yeah.
they don't have one like at all. They don't have full-time nurses on campus, And so these are the things that some of the teachers were trying to bring awareness to during the strike.
Right.
I wish we would have talked about the police budget more during the strike, and I kind of wonder why we didn't. And now, in a year and a half later, we're talking about it. I have to admit that I wasn't aware of that either. I wasn't aware of a $70 million budget, and I do pay attention to the budget and what's going on financially with LAUSD because we know they're not in a good situation like many other large school districts. And so I wonder why that wasn't talked about before, but I am happy that we're talking about it now. And I just wanted to mention, I don't know if you guys are following, but I follow a lot of these different accounts on Instagram that really help inform me about these movements and what's going on and who's leading it and what the statistics are. And there's one on Instagram called Students Deserve. And that is actually, and I'm going to share some of that information in the comments later where people can follow. And so I've gotten a lot of information there. Students Deserve is led by students. They actually did a district-wide survey throughout all of LAUSD. So I believe now when you do surveys, and you guys probably know with the organizations you work with, it's hard to get everybody to respond to those surveys, right? If you put out a survey and we get like 500 comments back or responses back, we're like, okay, that's good. We want more. But that also goes to show how hard it is to reach and connect. The district can send out surveys, but it doesn't necessarily mean all parents are getting them. The parents who are connected and involved probably are, but it's hard to reach those other parents that don't have the time to really go on campus and stay connected, right? And so, they got over 5,000 responses to their survey. 5,000. Now that is amazing. That's a really good percentage. But when you look at the overall student base, that's still a low number. But again, 5,000 is really great, especially compared to a typical response, which would be closer to 500. So they put out this survey, and I'll share some of these statistics in the comments. And they got responses back, and some of the information was just so shocking. And I think it's something that really people should know. So, for example, they said 5,433 people responded to the survey in 5 days. They only had it out for 5 days across all 7 districts. LAUSD has 7 districts. 86% of the students, now this was a survey that was just for students. It wasn't for parents and community members. It was for students. 86% of the students and alumni called for the defunding of LA school police. 86%. Notably, 88% of current Black students want school police defunded. 88% of the Black students that responded. 85% of current and former students who had interactions with school police reported them as negative, including experiences like being questioned, randomly searched, harassed, use of force, and racially profiled. That was 85%. So, these are some numbers that I think are important and that I think people should know. And I think it's really important before even the parents really step in too much to listen to the students. And that's what I keep trying to tell people is we need to listen to the students and why they are saying overwhelmingly that they don't want people on campus. So I'm going to try to share some of those resources with people later on. But yeah, I mean, what do you think if we were to say, let's say, even if we didn't pull all of that 70 million away from police and we pulled away half, like, what do you think our schools could look like? Or what do you think like we would start to see? Because so many people they're so scared of the unknown. We've never done something like this. This is all we know. But just because we've always done it this way doesn't mean that it's the best way. And like we've talked about with charter schools, they've given us an example to see something different and something that does work and something that works in these communities where you typically would find police. So I'm just kind of like, what would you guys envision or think is a realistic place that we could get to as far as our schools?
Yeah.
Well, I think in order to even achieve a place where we can see, I would say, a holistic approach to schooling, and just creating these environments that are designed for their specific communities, I think is something that in the last weeks, I'm really learning that is what our communities need. And I think it really starts with LAUSD acknowledging their systemic and just racism, and really holding accountable the district, the boards, the admins, and the teachers that further perpetrate like this systematic racism in our schools. So I think that once we really get through having that conversation, because I think we can all agree that LAUSD doesn't necessarily do that or has done that in a way that they really acknowledge how they uphold these systems just by holding these positions of power. It's a process that we entrust, I think, our elected officials to really serve our communities and our people. And we really are seeing that throughout generations, time and time again, they've only continued to uphold a racist system that has only really hurt and has caused a lot of pain, I think, for a lot of Indigenous, Black, and people of color and our children. So, but again, going back to holistic approaches, definitely a re-look at our curriculum and our policies around that, really uprooting all these years that we haven't done that, I think, as a nation, and really pressuring our states to really take up and learn our history, but from a pre-colonial perspective, in whatever ways that is, because although I think we can also all acknowledge and agree that a lot of our own teachings and knowledge have also been robbed from us through colonization. So really looking at that and understanding the true history of our country. And I think that would really have to be the center, just so that we really have an understanding of where our identities and who we are as people fit into that puzzle piece. And, we need to have an understanding of learning who we are and where we come from, and not just, the Western perspective. And I think that's really where we're headed, is really dismantling that Western perspective that has been, time and time again, we've been upholding it even unconsciously as a society, because we don't really question what it is that we're learning. But in reality is that we really should be questioning everything. So I think that's a little bit of what I could see happening, is just a school filled with more counselors, more resources for our students and parents, I think, is also important. And really incorporating language. I mean, we can't ignore that language has also been something that's been largely violated across our education system, simply by not providing resources and really for the parents and for our students, whether they are undocumented or not documented or documented. So I think that's really addressing how our teachers and our own admins and our own schools have upheld these ways of treating people. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I think, Salma, what you said right now of just this discovery of identity, I think it's so important, because I think it, again, going back to what your point of, it needs to be reflective in our curriculum, and we need to be able to learn our history and learn every perspective. And it's been really great to see so many people calling for this, and now understanding, I think with Black Lives Matter, just so much has shifted for us as a society, really, and really calling out these systems that have not worked and have really been created for us to fail. And on a few, I think it was on our first Sister Comadre live that happened a few weeks ago, one of the comadres mentioned, like, these systems are doing exactly what they were designed to do. And that's stuck with me since then. It's like, yeah, no, 100% they are. And I think it's really needing to take a step back and look at, okay, this system is not doing, its job in serving, people of color. And we need to be able to be okay with having shift happen and looking at every perspective and having every perspective in these conversations, and from students, parents, and we need to stop trusting our elected officials to do right by us, and we need to be able to call them out and say, and it's okay for us to do that. I think like a lot of times we look for approval to be like, oh, is it okay for us to speak out and say these things that are very uncomfortable and have these uncomfortable conversations with them. But yes, it's okay for us to do. They are public officials who have been elected into these offices. And I think, for me, I'm like, I just hope that people are going to become more aware on the importance of local elections and the importance on voting. We have such a low voter turnout rate. I was looking at the mayoral election. 20% of people in LA decided who was going to be our mayor.
Mhm.
So I'm just like, and then everybody's upset about, his
Right?
decision making and like, what he's been doing
Yes.
these past years. I'm like, yeah, that's what happens when nobody goes out and votes. Like
Right.
people don't, I guess a lot of people haven't made the correlation and the connection of the importance of it and how critical it is, because I think, this pandemic has really showed us that the people who are supposed to be making the decisions for us, aren't doing a good job, and they haven't been for a long time. And I think this is really just bringing to light all of those kind of discrepancies of who is, in these positions and why, like their true intention. So I think it's definitely like a lot of different layers to it, but I think, that's one of them. And then just having these really hard conversations with our electeds on, what we want to see happen in our community. And I think it really needs to start at a larger scale, because so many, people are feeling these frustrations and, see that, things need to change and they cannot continue the way they have. Our students have been failing for generations, and it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. So.
I think that's so important what you said about elected officials. And, I've been one of those constituents on the other side of the table from an elected official telling them, hey, like this is not okay, and I think that's so important. And I love that there are a lot of parents like myself who are involved and who are doing these things. Not only are we helping these people get elected in the first place, the people that we feel is best, for that position based on the options that we have, right? And then holding them accountable once they do get elected. Like, hey, I'm not just here to make phone calls for you and knock on doors.
Right.
I will do if I think you're the right person. But afterwards, you're accountable to us. You're elected by us, for us, to serve us with our money. And so I've seen some people do a great job of that and some not. I shout out to my assemblywoman, Luz Rivas, who is amazing and represents her community so well, and has a teaching background and really thinks about the schools and really thinks about the students in her community, specifically the homeless students she focuses on a lot, which unfortunately we do have a lot. And, those are the types of elected officials that I want to see more in office. And whatever I can do to keep her in that position, because assembly people only have a 2-year term, which I think is really odd, to be honest. But so, for example, where some people we might want to, stop their term limits or say, hey, like you're done, you've been in office forever. There are some people who do represent our communities well, who also reflect our communities, are from them, and are doing a great job. And so we need to support those folks. But again, still keeping them accountable. They could veer off and go a different way than what the community wants. So we have to keep those relationships. I think that's really important. One thing I wanted to touch on, we've got about 7 minutes or so left that I wanted to touch on. There are a lot of teachers that are against taking police off of campus. And I know if Letty was here, she would be talking about this. So I definitely want to hit this. What do you think about that? What do you think about the teachers who do want? There are many who say, hey, no, this is time. It's time to get police off campus. And there are some that are saying, no, we still want police on campus. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I think immediately I'm thinking I would like to know what teachers are like. are working at what schools and how their feelings towards that. Because I think it's apparent that I think a lot of like the public comment. So for a few weeks ago, I got the chance to call in during the LA City Council meeting on their police budget that they've been talking about, and just advocating for the LA people's budget. And so I kind of was representing a few coalitions. I know the Latino coalition, and then I was representing Semilla. So, you know, I had these talking points that I had to make. And so I'm on the phone call, I'm waiting, and I'm listening to all these other speakers, maybe like 2 hours worth of speakers before me. And mostly everybody is advocating for, we wouldn't have to have security or policing if we provided students with the necessary resources and programming that can engage them in ways that we haven't been, and really look at how that can affect how we, whether we don't have policing on campus. But there was a teacher who called in during that time, and she was advocating for the policing on campus. And so I think a few people after her definitely came for her and were like, hey, like, we don't need more policing. You know, and so it just makes me think about, yeah, why are teachers feeling that way? You know, because then at that point it seems like, is it for the safety of the students, or is it for their safety of not having to deal with what it is that the students, and really getting to the root of why there might be some situations that take place, whether they're violent or, you know, even just through the way we communicate, you know, so yeah, or bullying. But I think really addressing the roots of our students and their lives, and really building that relationship could really affect how they are treated amongst each other. Also, maybe providing more teachers that are aligned to the culture and the community that are in those schools. You know, I think that's another thing that we're going to have to really look at, is who are teaching what students. And yeah, no, and it's definitely going to have to undertake a lot of training, I think, to undo a lot of, you know, I think, yeah, there's a lot of great teachers. I know I grew up with a lot of amazing teachers. So it's definitely heartbreaking to always learn that that's not the experience for every other student. And for teachers to feel the need to have policing, even though their students are asking and saying that they don't feel safe. So yeah, that's a lot.
Who is teaching what communities? That right there was exactly. And we know overwhelmingly that the high percentage, most teachers are white females.
Right.
We know that this is a fact. And this is why so many people are calling for educators of color, Black and brown educators, to come into this field more, so that students can see teachers that reflect them, that they can see themselves in. And, you know, I think LAUSD has increased that. I see a lot of Latino teachers in LAUSD that were LAUSD students that became teachers to want to change the system. But sometimes they once you get into that system, you might become a little bit complacent, you know,
So
even though have great intentions.
Yeah, that's where I wanted to say that. I think in many schools, teachers are police, but without the guns and the badges. They are the ones that are upholding, again, these systems, that, and still continuing to perpetrate racism towards their students. So yeah, I think that's a little bit about where I stand and my understanding of why we should not have police in our schools.
I think for me, with the teachers who are supportive of the policing, I think it's fear. It comes from a lot of fear. Fear of unknown, of what, you know, these new kind of systems could look like, and just again, like, being comfortable in knowing that the police are there to serve and protect. And I think being told that they are there to serve and protect and be there for the greater good is leaving so many with, like, well, nothing needs to change, it's all fine, like, you know, we're all good. But the reality of it is knowing that, like, these systems lead to bigger systems. And, you know, we look at the school to prison pipeline. I mean, I would love to see the correlation between, you know, those teachers who are, you know, the ones who are sending, you know, their students to the principal's office, and what that means, and, like, really the real effects of that. And so there just needs to be a lot of reform in the classroom. I mean, from our curriculums to the people who are teaching us, and making sure that they have the proper training to be able to, help our students in these situations where, it's uncomfortable and difficult to deal with. But I mean, that's a part of kind of the job that you signed up for, and you have to be prepared and ready for that. And I think it needs to come from every level, from, the proper training, but I think also like social settings, and understanding like the social backgrounds of the students that you're serving, and like emotional. I mean, teachers are like, I feel like also act as therapists, and they need to have that training to be able to, de-escalate situations and just understand how to handle the classroom and its different dynamics. It's always shifting. So we need to be able to have all of that combined in one person, and it's a lot of responsibility, and we can't take it lightly. We can't give, every person who wants to be a teacher credential and that's it. And, they have a few months of experience and then boom, they're in the classroom. Like, I think it needs to be a lot more than that. And there needs to be more training and just more support in every level.
Specifically, if you're going to go into a community that maybe is not the same culture as yours.
Yeah.
If you are a white teacher and you're going to go into a brown community and teach, then yeah, you should have some training and understanding of what these communities are like, and it's unfortunate too. When I hear other parents say that they want to have they want to have police on campus. And again, I point out like, hey, students are leading this movement. And my question is like, some of these parents are not really on campus. So do you really know what is happening on campus? I had a heated discussion with a parent, and she went to LAUSD schools, but her kids don't. And she was talking about defending, the police and some other programs. And I'm like, wait, how is wrestling and football connected to the police budget? I don't understand how those are connected. I understand you're saying those programs help troubled youth, but then within the same breath, I said, a lot of these students don't feel that random searches are random. They're not random when it's the same students every day. And this is a person who is of Mexican descent, who comes back and says, well, those students are being targeted every day because they're doing something bad. It is not about race. It's about their behavior. And if they weren't doing this or that, they wouldn't be, having these problems. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. Well, first of all, and then said something about, maybe I should get my news from Not the News. And I'm like, oh, I get my news from parents and students that are on campuses. I am on campuses. I know what's going on. I talk to other parents and what their experiences are. And I have heard horrifying stories of the way Black students have been targeted by their own teacher, a second grader being targeted by their own teacher, saying that they have behavioral problems in class, when really this child is gifted and you're not challenging them a lot. Really, the child just needed more challenging work. And the reason he was done with his work so fast was because it was easy for him and it wasn't challenging enough. And so the parent is asking for more work because she knows her child can handle it. And the teacher is focusing on behavioral issues. That is how the school to prison pipeline starts, right there. Another friend of mine recently said, there's a name for it. Yes, there's a name for it. It's called the school to prison pipeline. And she's a young mom. Her kid's not in school yet, so maybe she doesn't know that yet. But absolutely, there is. And that's because this is a real system that's in place, especially in California. I had a cousin who was much darker complected than me, who grew up in the same community that I grew up, who was a troubled youth. My uncle was in jail. His mother was a drug addict. He was in and out of foster homes, even out of juvenile hall. And he ended up passing away when he was very young in an accident. But he was constantly targeted by police in the community here. And even after he died, as tragic as it was, they just referred to him as a gang member, as a gang member. And like, for the family, that is heartbreaking. And not to say that maybe he wasn't tagging or he wasn't doing some things that maybe he shouldn't have been, but why was he doing those things? Oh, your father's in jail? You're living in juvenile hall? You're in and out of foster homes, where we've all heard horror stories of what happens there. So that is where, like, police coming in and addressing a student like that, it's not even a Band-Aid on the wound.
Right.
You're just pouring salt in the wound, like literally, when we need to get to the source of that wound and what is happening to this child and why is this happening to them. And so that is what I think of when I think of defunding the police and reforming it and changing it. And so, you know, what would my cousins of life look like had he had counselors, had he had therapists, and a therapist that he could relate to, that he was going to feel comfortable with? Because if it is, you know, maybe somebody that they can't connect with, that they don't feel they have anything in common with, or this person's not going to understand me, they're not going to open up. You know, there's a reason why that child is not opening up. So yes, we need to have more counselors of color, more therapists and nurses, so that these students in those communities can feel more comfortable opening up and talking about what's really going on. And, you know, some of these, I've seen a lot of teachers saying that they do support the police. And the next thing that they're saying is that they feel like they need protection from students because they're scared of their students. So again, what is going on with that student to make them feel that way? Oh, maybe one of their parents just got deported. You know, they could be dealing with all kinds of different things that we're not taking into consideration. And so when I see, you know, teachers saying that it's that they don't feel safe from these students, well, one, maybe they shouldn't be teaching at that school. Maybe that school is not for them. They didn't grow up in a community like that. They don't understand it. You know, and again, those are teachers that are calling the police on the students, and those students end up getting targeted and labeled. It goes in their file. It follows them where they go. Next time they get in trouble, I mean, with the road that my cousin was on, he was going to end up in prison. That was the trajectory that we were seeing. And, you know, had somebody been able to intervene and really help him, as a family, we did as much as we could. And actually, to say he was my cousin is really not even justified. He was more like a brother because my mom was raising him for many, many years, and we went to the same elementary school for years. And so, you know, that's just one example. My cousin, who I love, is one example of so many students who have been through this. And many of them are in jail right now. And I have always said that charter schools are not the privatizers. The privatizers are these for-profit prisons. Those are the real privatizers. Those are for-profit corporations who are making money on putting our kids in jail. Plain and simple. 100%. And so there are some good things that the governor is working on as far as getting rid of youth detention prisons. I'm sure you guys have heard. And those are steps that scare some people, but I think for us kind of know that this is what we've been doing is not serving them. It's not serving them. It's not serving the communities they come from. It's definitely not serving their families who want to help, you know, these family members that are maybe troubled, who have been through some things. So I just wanted to thank you guys for being here. If there's anything else that you guys want to add that maybe I missed before we go, any last points?
I think we hit all the points, and definitely just calling for the abolishing of the police on campuses and schools.
I think the only thing out there that we didn't mention was some people talking about school shootings and what are you going to do? Okay, well, let's talk about Parkland and the fact that there was a security guard and the fact that he ran the other way. And it's not funny, but many lives were cost because of that. You know, I'd say that, like, if there's any kind of humor, it's just because I know that that's not necessarily the solution. So that's something that, and again, if we were able to reform some of these troubled youth, maybe these youth that are going into schools and shooting their own classmates, like over here in Castaic, not far from where I live, maybe if that student had received the counseling that he needed because his father died, so let's go back to grieving counseling, maybe that wouldn't have happened. Just another example.
One last thing.
Go ahead.
One last thing that I was just going to say is that I think we need to be okay with having these conversations around like emotional support and also of like defunding. I think that term is so scary for a lot of people, and I think it correlates to just like completely taking away all the money from police. And I think like we definitely need to be able to have that distinction amongst, you know, our own individuals and just the conversations that we have. And again, like the importance of really having a safe space in school, I think is so important. And I think we definitely need to figure out a way to incorporate that in all schools, to be able to have that emotional support and have students be comfortable enough to share when things are happening and know that, they don't have to be acting out and having these, just ways that, can lead to so many other issues. So yeah, I think we just need to continue to have that conversation of having a safe space in our schools and knowing that students feel comfortable enough to share when things are happening and when they don't feel safe or are just feeling kind of out of it. I think it's okay for us to be able to say that, hey, students don't have to be okay all the time, and that's okay too. Being a student itself is already really stressful, but I think having the added stress of, all the different roles that we play, whether that's in our families or our communities, I think, we need to be able to know that students have lives outside of school and that they carry that in the classroom. So yeah.
Yeah. And when those issues are so pressing and they're feeling that, it's hard for them to learn.
Yeah.
My daughter's third grade teacher was this amazing lady, Miss Walker, and she remember telling me that she had a lot of foster youth and homeless youth in her third grade class with my daughter, and that kids would come in and literally just sit at their desk and cry for like the first 30 minutes coming into class. And so you can't teach like that. So she would just stop everything and she would pull them into a circle. And they would sit in a circle and talk about their feelings and talk about, maybe listen to some music and some calming. And she was really a great example of taking an extra step. She was actually a Black woman as well. And, goes to show understanding those communities.
Yeah.
And she would take that extra step to let them, to address the emotional needs and traumas that were happening in order for those students to even start learning. And those are the kind of teachers that I want to see in the classroom. And still to this day, one of my daughter's favorite teachers. So yeah, shout out to Miss Walker. But thanks you guys so much. I appreciate this is such an important conversation. Maybe we will continue it later on, but I really appreciate you guys coming because I really wanted to get some student perspectives. And I really wanted people to hear that from you and from people who have been in schools recently. So thank you so much. And we'll be back next week.
Thank you.
Have a good one.